We live in an era that celebrates the move, the hop, the pivot, reinvent. The data says that average tech workers today changes companies every 2 to 3 years. My guess has been in one company, 22 plus years and never left. Today, we're going to talk about what the decision actually costs you and what it gives you that the hopping crowd never gets. Hi, I'm Gino Degregori, and welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. My guest today is Michael Roop. And before I get into his bio, I want to kind of share something. Mike and I have been known each other for a couple of years. We have a monthly stand-up, tag up. We talk about the federal space, about our businesses, about the work. Somewhere along the way, though, we started as not only kind of talking about partnerships and conversations and projects, but we have started having some real honest peer-to-peer leadership relationship that we built. Mike is now a managing director at Accenture Federal Services, where he leads the national security programs. But what makes the conversation worth it, I think, is he's been in Accenture for 20 plus years, and he started from right off college, and now leading this stuff. It's unheard of, and then you don't hear that nowadays. So Mike, welcome to the podcast here. I appreciate you making the time to have this conversation. So you please share with our audience here a little bit more. Go in depth as far as you want, please.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Gino. I appreciate the time. Yeah, so 22 years, not what I expected, sort of out of the gate with this. And you don't know when you're kind of starting your career, like where is it going to go? You try to model like your expectations, behavior off of other people you've seen, what's worked, what hasn't here. And I think, what I found and what, I've seen other people find too, especially at Accenture, has been the ability to, one, grow your career in all sorts of different directions with it, kind of make paths that give you the opportunities that really almost feel like, joining new companies at times as well. As you're sort of shifting roles. And I think the key piece in the connective tissue there is the leaders and mentors that you sort of follow that, one, inspire you along there as well and kind of model the roles that you want to move into along the way. If you don't have that, I feel like it becomes very difficult to kind of one, see that path and then kind of stick with it as well, and to really be able to grow in the direction that you want to. So it's been an interesting path along the way. I'll say, with the way that sort of the federal government operates and the way that projects sort of spin up and spin down and everything else, and where you focus. The unexpected stuff has often been the most rewarding pieces, where you kind of move in a direction that you didn't necessarily think you would, but find, all sorts of new roles and opportunities kind of spinning off of that. So the journey is the important piece.
Beautiful, beautiful. Congratulations, Mike. And one as you were explaining, one thing that kept popping up myself. I don't know if you ever heard this before, but people don't leave companies. People leave managers, right? Or that are supervisors, right? And
Yeah,
it sounds like, you've had amazing leaders out there in your entire career that has kept you growing and pushing you and kind of giving you the opportunity to grow. So that's amazing. So
for sure.
we'll touch base on that a little bit here in a second. But before we dive into that, is the first question that I love asking all my guests is, what does being a kind leader mean to you?
Yeah, and I love it. And I love this question and sort of thinking about like, what does that actually mean, to me as well. I feel like a lot of times we're so busy kind of pushing through to the next milestone to what we need to accomplish, taking the time to step back and just think about your leadership style, what's important to you, like all those aspects, like becomes important, or else you kind of forget. And then, you don't have the ability to kind of figure out where you need to focus next. But I think, a kind leader to me, there's a couple things that I think about and then I've seen be successful both with my own style and with a lot of the mentors and leaders that I've had as well. One is creating that environment where people feel safe. I always feel like the first step is making sure you address those basic human needs. Without it, everything else tends to fall to the wayside as a distraction around it, especially now in this growing era of AI that's created a lot of uncertainty, and other elements. And part of that includes setting up a framework where, leaders have permission to fail, giving them enough guardrails so they don't sink the ship,
Yeah.
obviously, but feeling safe to take risks. So I think number one is creating that safe environment. Number two, like being consistent. It's interesting. We often think great leaders being just these dynamic, exciting, incredibly inspiring people all over the place. But, so many studies have found like consistency, predictability are one of, if not the most important aspects in a leader, where people don't have the extra stress or inconsistency of trying to understand each day, like, what are expectations? How is this person going to react? How should I act? What should I focus on around it? And I think this aspect is so important because it can be really tough to maintain during especially challenging times, and that's when people need your steadiness the most around this. So I think that sort of consistency with people, especially in the tough times, goes a long way towards people wanting to follow and showing that empathy to the people that are around you. And then, last, which I think is very important, we often neglect as leaders, is, being kind to yourself as well. It's so easy to carry your stress and, negative emotions with you and into your engagements with others. So if you don't practice some of that self care and mindfulness, it plays out in all the engagements, interactions that you have. And giving yourself the time, blocking off parts of your calendar, taking a few minutes to go outside and breathe in there, like even the little pieces around it as well, you flow into all the interactions that you have with others. So those are probably some of the top, I would say
Yeah.
maybe the top three areas that I see.
I love it. I love it. Thank you very much for that perspective. And those are very three strong ones that I've had, you know, throughout my episodes and recording. People have had different, but combining them, the three, is very important. So just to regurgitate what you said, just to make sure in my own words, right?
Yeah.
Creating the environment, right? That safe space where people can be themselves is very critical. Because the minute you have an environment where people are fearful to speak up, you're done. You're not going to get the information, the perspective, the ideas, right? The innovation, because people don't want to speak up because they're going to get their head chops off or get kicked out or whatever, right? So that is very critical, right? For people listening, that is the number one thing. Create that safe space where people can be themselves, their genuine self, and learn. I love what you said. It's like leaders have the opportunity to fail, and that is strong, right? You have to have that leader because we don't have all the answers, Mike. You know that, right? I mean, we're gonna do the best we can with what we have, and if we have a leadership that is going to respect that, and it's like, hey, if you do make a mistake, all right, you learn from it, and you move on to the next thing, and right, and the next thing is going to be even better and stronger. I love the consistency because without that, we will not. It's when I say be genuine, right? Be yourself. It's hard to fake it. It's hard to fake it and get the check. Yeah, I here are my core values and here's what I do, right? But the reality, you can't stay consistent. The whole companies and the people and the leaders that continue to move through these challenging times are the ones that consistently provide the safe space, provide the feedback, and allows their teams to kind of grow around them, right? And really serves them to be better, the better version of themselves, right? And then the third one, just again, I know you said this, but I just like to regurgitate just from my own perspective is very important what you said is kind to yourself. And that is something that I recently learned, Mike. I've been, as a leader, as an owner of a company, I'm like, go, 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 go. There's so many people, so many responsibilities, and at the end of the day, you look at yourself, you look at your health, you look at your mind and all those different things. And it's like, whoa, nobody's taking care of me. Right. And who has that responsibility to take care of yourself? You do. Right. So thank you for sharing those. I mean, I love the 3, and, I definitely will put that as part of the show notes to make sure people understand, but I would love to see some examples, like, and throughout your, 22 plus years at Accenture, have you provided that environment, and have somebody provided that? I mean, you have a story that you would love to share?
Yeah, well, and one that always comes to mind, and you talk about sort of the turbulent times where things are in flux, people are uncertain, everything's changing, and I've been through a couple of these, but I remember very intensive sort of project opportunity that we had with a government customer that all of a sudden sort of came to a massive halt around it, huge reductions, as often happens with funding changes, that sort of thing. And we had a large team there that was, in those roles for an extended period of time. It was sort of, what they knew, what they understood, what they were comfortable with. Great team, but also that created a lot of uncertainty for, where am I going to go next? What am I able to do around my career, around my role with this? And it's one of those examples, because it was so sudden with this of, what do you do? Do you, sort of get the comms out quickly, sort of work through this, focus on, hey, how do I grow this business back? Or do you take a minute and stop and create that, sort of environment for the people there so that they have the paths. And it's really the piece that I think creates retention, and other elements when you come across scenarios like this where it is incredibly beneficial to take the extra time, with the team. And so it was multiple days of sort of sitting down with individuals and walking through this. These were sort of very unique, security clearances and skill sets around it as well. So we knew that this was a workforce and people that we wanted to continue to offer opportunities to grow. And having those kind of intensive sort of one-on-ones throughout the day, helping individuals map this out and letting them know that there are paths where they can be successful as well. And a lot of these people came sort of full circle back, into roles later when funding came back, full swing. But I think, one of those examples where taking the extra time with people, making sure that there is comfort and confidence, and leadership support to show that they are supported and that there is a longer path for folks was kind of key there. So again, multiple examples when that happened, but
Yeah, yeah.
this one with about 50 plus people was just a case where they needed that, or else we were gonna
Yeah.
lose people indefinitely.
Well, not to get into the weeds, but just curious. So was
Yeah.
that recently or early in your career, or is that in the middle?
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago, I think. So about in the middle of it, kind of that point where it's growing comfortable with certain leadership elements, and it's a moment where you sort of step up or you back up and let somebody else do it. So I think a character defining moment at that
Beautiful.
stage.
And that's why I wanted to dig a little deeper on that because a great story, right? It kinda you remember so vividly and it was a growth opportunity there, right? You could easily say, "You know what? We lost it, cut everybody, let's move on, let's go to the
Yeah,
next thing." You put you looked at it from a human side perspective, right? Like, okay, these are folks that we've invested a lot of money, but not just from an investment, but that they truly bring value to the organization, right? And thankfully, you potentially have other projects or other things that, as a large company, you might be able to do that. But even if you don't, there's other opportunities that you can, that can help internally or with other partners and that kind of stuff, right? So and the big thing is what as I'm hearing you is the communication, right? Hey, no need to panic. We got you. Let's take a step back. And I'm sure you talk to each individual like one on one, and you had the perspective, and that people remember that, and people care about that, right? And then like, hopefully, out of the
absolutely.
50, all the 50 people are still there, maybe. So
I think that a vast majority with it. So yes, it goes a long way.
retention for sure. That is a big one. So I know
Yeah,
it's when I was something similar, not from a losing a project, but it was somebody made a mistake and they lost a lot of code.
yeah,
And I remember they thought we were just gonna like yell at him, fire him, and at the particular moment, it's like, okay, let's solve the problem at hand. Let's not focus and point fingers. Let's not focus. Let's communicate. Let's own it to the customer and be like, hey, this is what happened. We're here. We're not going anywhere. Let's take this. And then afterward, we had a feedback. Right, we got feedback from the customer, and thankfully we didn't lose a contract, but we did not fire the individual because he was very not only apologetic, he knew the mistake that happened, and now he didn't do it again, right? So, but it's about the communication. It's about the opportunity. It's allow keep doing and providing that safe space, and people are going to remember that and keep growing. So.
yeah, for sure. The differentiator.
Absolutely. So moving more towards the 22 plus year, I want to go back and pull at that thread. Before recording, I asked you that question, but like what nowadays people are staying, 2, 3 years, maybe less sometimes, right? Contracting, the contracting world, the government. Sometimes I've seen like people hop 6 months. Every 6 months they're moving around, right? And I asked that question, and they're like, well, I just follow where the contract takes me, right? And I happen to end on. But you being so long, what has kept you in there for? for your entire career.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, back to what we were talking about I did not expect that, initially to sort of be the path like, hey, how could I stay with one company that long? Like, people don't do that anymore. What I really found, and we talked some about the leaders and the mentors around you. Like it really is all the relationships that you build on this. And it's if the culture is not there for one and you have a company where it's just everybody, hey, I'm going to be here for a couple years and I'm going to jump, like that creates a different dynamic, different environment overall. But when there's a culture that you can kind of stand behind that really is focused on relationships and how you build and knowing that your roles are going to change and evolve over time, and you can kind of build that framework where people have, the growth model, I think it enables a lot of things. And I found that for people that have, because there have, obviously been a number of people in different roles that have gone to other companies, some have come back, some have, shifted around with this as well. I often find, they miss a lot of the kind of strengthened relationship connectivity that you get where you're sort of growing up together with some of these leaders, alongside you as well. And I think you end up in all these different situations and scenarios where you find different ways that you're supporting each other along the way that really creates kind of a strong community within as well. So I feel like for those that have jumped and gone away, like they've missed a lot of that.
Mm.
They've missed opportunities for one, and then just really some of the advantages that building relationships with other leaders can bring you within an organization, where you have additional stepping stones. Effectively, you're creating in other areas, of a business and organization that you can jump into as well. So it's really been that framework around relationships and the culture that keep the machine going. No doubt that I don't see for folks who do more of kind of the hopping
Yeah.
consistently.
I'm glad you said that the culture is critical, right? And you hear that, in business book, right? Peter Drucker says, right, culture is breakfast or strategy for breakfast or something like that.
Yeah.
And it is, right? And it is. People want to be in an environment where they're appreciated, an environment where there is, value, where there are upward mobilities and the connections and the relationship, and they're seen as one, right? So, and I'm curious, as you were talking, I was thinking, you and I are pretty similar age, and are
Yeah.
we seeing that? Are you seeing that still? With the longevity of some of these folks, with the different generations doing the same thing with the strong culture that you have, or is also do you think it's shifting now a little bit with the new generations coming on board?
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of observe and watch, and I think about it with my own kids as well, and it's like how are they going to be, when they're ready for that also. I do see more of a kind of sporadic interaction with businesses and companies now from new people coming in, but I will say. I often see leaders as well that have been there, for longer periods of time, have a heavy influence on folks that are coming in that maybe thought, coming in the company, I'm going to try this out for a year and then I'm going to jump somewhere else. They, see the modeling of, what can happen. They see the, engagement and commitment that leaders have as well. And then that creates sort of more cohesion and a bond that stretches them out maybe another year and then another year beyond that as well. So I think some of these behavioral pieces, to your question, I do definitely see it in younger generations where there's just more of a mentality of I'm going to be nimble and jump around to a lot of stuff, which can be good, but that also then couples with what they see within the culture and sort of business areas that they're within, and that can have a huge influence as well, where they understand kind of the value of sticking with a role or a company.
Absolutely. And I think what I like about the consulting world too and Accenture in general is like you can see the projection, right? Or your career projection.
Yeah,
And you do this, you can essentially go that. So that's I would think is easier to not easier, but it's more there's a better opportunity for you to stick around a little longer if you do the right things, you have the right culture, you have the right leaders, right? So your Accenture has made a really good environment to be able to do that, right? So, and that's one of the things that with my company, I'm trying to do something similar. But I'm gonna put you in the spot.
yeah,
I'm curious, was there a moment, that you almost left? You don't have to give the detail, but just yeah, like, you thought the grass was greener, and what
yeah.
kept? what kept you, right?
Yeah, yeah. Always a good and fun and interesting question too. And I feel like, and this was probably, I'm going to say maybe 12 years ago, around it. There was, I think I was getting, looking for promotion to manager. I think at that point, with our roles within Accenture. And, there were a couple other people that were sort of similar kind of trajectories and paths here around it. And, I thought I was, knocking it out of the park that year and doing great, achieving everything I needed, like impressing my leaders sort of up the chain around it. And, it comes around to our performance cycle and, I'm waiting and waiting. And, promotion doesn't come at that point. I thought, oh, it's like, this is the year, this is going to happen. And, one or two of the other folks that I was kind of tracking, like they hit it, like they made the promotion there around it. And you look at that and we're creatures of relativity. We always are, comparing to like
Of course.
how our peers are behaving, how they're being rewarded, everything else. And it was one of those moments where it's like, well, hey, this was a really tough year to put in a lot of hard work, and I kind of can see like other folks as well. And hey, was this fair? Was this right? Is this an environment I want to stick around in with it? And it was one of those where it's like, all right, well, do I want to make a change here? Is
Mm,
this like intensive, impactful enough that, I could just do, better somewhere else? Fortunately, I didn't. I will say that year was just sort of all over the place with
yeah, yeah,
some of our organizational structures and other pieces. But I think I stepped back and I looked at, some of the other folks that had gone different paths and, promoted at different times, moved into roles at different times. And I saw how success was not just driven by that. Hey, well, this is when I was promoted and moved into the next role. And that's going to drive how much more successful I am than, everyone else around it. And you understand that, the typical careers don't just go like this, they go like this. And sometimes that can be good and open up
yeah.
other opportunities. So that was probably, a time where I at least thought about it. And I'm like, hey, do I want to open up my aperture here? Is my path still going to be there? And fortunately, I, you know, took a couple minutes to think about it.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I know that's, I didn't
Yeah.
want to put you on the spot, but I did want to ask that question because I'm sure out of the 22 years, and something might have come up. And but what kept you sounds like it's yeah, grass is greener on the other side, and but there's still opportunity in the culture that really kept you, and the things that are in that environment. I hope you got promoted not too long after that. So
I did. I think it was the next year. So it all worked itself out, right?
there you go, excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
So you brought up, we understand both of us in the national security environment. One question that I'm always curious, and we struggle too, and like, how do you share that culture with people that are on site, right? With folks that like, hey, I'm just there. You've heard the terminology, they going native, right? They're working with the government, and which is great, right? We put these resources with our skill sets, right? We train them. We try to do as much as we can to make sure that they don't lose that tether back to corporate, right? Or back to who we are. How is that working? And what do you think some of the challenges, and how have you addressed those, right?
Yeah, and it is a very challenging, environment to work in. And I worked in, a skiff in a secure facility, almost exclusively for many years, along my career. And, you do create kind of almost a separate culture and environment in there that is, sort of forced and driven by the constraints of those environments. I think what I found over time is, and your point around like, how do you maintain connectivity, back to the broader organization, to peers, to other projects, to everything else that's so important, so that you, one, get that diversity of experience and thought, and just maintain, a lot of the engagement that's so critical, everything we talk about with culture around this. And I think you need to be very intentional about sort of creating an environment that facilitates that. And it means extra effort, in a lot of cases as a leader, for how you structure that efficiently and effectively, so that you give people the opportunities to, to break out, to engage, to have the time to actually do, other things to drive both business development, their own, insights and knowledge, solutioning, some complex and fun things around it. So I think understanding the challenges that those environments create when you are sort of in secure facilities, embedded in mission all the time, and then making sure that you are sort of reinforcing that on a continuous basis. And it's going to be harder sometimes, to really extract people out of that landscape. So the extra effort to do that and get creative and ask others for help, I think is very important.
Absolutely, and I love what you said, the intention. You have to be intentional. It can't just be just like you said earlier about be consistent, right? It can't just be, "Hey, we're gonna connect," we give you the opportunity one quarter, and then the future quarters, you forgot about them. You don't circle
Yeah.
back, you're not so they feel it, right? So if you don't have the right intention and a consistency to really show them that, you're here. You're here to support them, and they're there to support our customer. And then it's not just about being billable, it's also about, what do I talk about empathy, right? And understanding their needs, their wants, their passion, right? And as a coach, right? I look at it as a leader being a coach. How do we put the pieces together and put the right team that is not only efficiently delivering value to the customer, but they are in their zone, right? They are in the environment that they want to thrive, or they have the tools that they want to thrive. And I love what you say about business development. Some people thrive a little more on like, hey, I can understand business and I can potentially grow it. Or some's like, hey, I got some great ideas and solution and technology. Have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? But you won't have any of that if you don't have a safe space, right? A safe organization and a culture to support that and the intention to drive that, right? Right? I think that's what you're saying, and I think I see a lot of successes with many companies doing that. Or let me rephrase that. I think a lot of companies are not doing that, but the successful ones are, right? So
Yeah, yeah, I think you nailed it. And to your point on consistency here as well, like you do this for like a couple weeks, and sure it's great, but you quickly lose trust and people, if that isn't kept up, and you continue to be creative around it too, because as you mentioned, you're dealing with a lot of different people with different styles, different interests here, so you have to make sure that you're constantly thinking about how can you engage,
yeah.
effectively.
Absolutely. And then pulling a thread on the national security a little bit more, right now we talk about what's in it, how we're providing the value to our employees, but what about the mission, right? What if something goes, because this is, just because you're pulling levers, pushing buttons, you're the folks that are supporting the war fighters or the people out there that are impacting, right? Like is having how would you characterize leadership, right? Especially from a kind leader to help making sure that the mission's still being delivered.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I will say I continue to be impressed, over my career at our people that are, very mission focused, and the diligence and commitment that they have, and just a natural mindfulness around them to understand the importance of the mission, like what is truly critical in any very critical situation, as some of these folks are supporting, whether it's frontline or further back around it. And I think as leaders, in order to support that effectively, one, it's recognizing that commitment. I think it's important to understand that that is not easy to do around it for one. So making sure that that is appreciated and the people know it's appreciated about it. And then two, as you mentioned, like there can be very challenging situations that pop up around this as well. Things that could, even if it's down the line, have, life or death impacts around it. So how do you give people the support knowing everyone is going to make mistakes? I think a lot of what we try to set up as a framework here is to create that safety net so that we're able to avoid catastrophe and other elements. But we know people are still going to make mistakes even in that environment, even though we've tried to minimize the impact of what that is, and making sure people know that that is also okay, and that again that the guardrails have been built and the safety net is there, and that they're being supported around this. And if you have a scenario that's not working out because it's not always the right scenario or situation for certain people, I think it's recognizing that also and making sure you can help people understand that and change if they need to also. Like you've always got to be looking at both sides of it.
So it's doable. Thank you for that, and it's doable, right? It's doable to be that, still lead with that, as a kind leader with the values, the core values that you mentioned, the three things, right? And still focus and have that accountability on the mission, which I love, right? You can still balance that correctly, and that's what makes a great organization like that Accenture is, right? To that we love partnering up with. So speaking of partnerships, right? So we talked about we've known each other for a couple of years now. We are looking at different things. What are some of the things that you are looking, not necessarily as from a business perspective or technology perspective, but would you agree that the way organizations and their culture is kind of has some influence in how you select or work with partners in a way?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. You think about even and it's interesting as we look at companies like even for acquisition as well. It's a great example of, well, what do you look at in a partner? And this is like extreme partnership because it's, hey, here is another business that we think would really combine effectively with ours, and culture becomes huge. And I would say that extends to any and all like effective partnerships also. How do we align from what our priorities are, how we sort of coach our people and support them along the way? Because when you don't have that, like you can have superficial relationships, you can go after contracts together, but you don't really have like teams that can intermingle and engage effectively on this, and your opportunities over time break down. So I think definitely alignment on cultures and how we kind of prioritize and treat our people is a big piece of it. I think building trust, obviously too around this as well, like is key out of the gate with this, and it's also how do you maintain that over time with it. You're gonna come across all sorts of difficult scenarios along the way where it's like, here's an opportunity or a project. How do I want to play this? Like, this may be a great way to like win this one quickly, but is it really going to be successful over time? And how do I partner more effectively so that we can actually bring greater value? So it's also fighting some of those impulses at times where it's quick wins, that type of thing that really don't leverage the effective partnership around it, and don't enable long term success either around
Right,
it.
right, right. No, great perspective, and thank you for sharing there, Mike. And I agree in all those areas. This is the same thing I look for is whether it's a large partner that we're trying to partner up, or a small or a medium sized organization. And for me, is building a transformational relationship rather than a transactional relationship, right? And
Love that.
what I mean by that is I'm not just trying to check the box and win work. I'm really trying to bring my value. How can the story of you and I together, bring so much value to the customer, right? It's going to help them go farther. It's going to help them go faster or whatever that may be, right? It's not so much, hey, what can you do for me? You get those a bunch of times, right? It's more about what can I bring to the table, Mike, right? And together we have a better together story at the end of the day, right? So,
Absolutely.
and that's, I'm just sharing with the audience in there that you're looking, right? There's kind leadership, it's not only with your employees or with your colleagues, it's also with partners. You have to think about, because you're going to be working together, right? Maybe there are different companies, but you need to ensure that there's compatibility and you're building that transformational partnership rather than just a transactional one. So
Yeah, so true. It's how we're successful, and to your point, how we transform and actually drive change, and find the big growth paths.
absolutely. So now it's time to flip the mic, Mike. Do you have a
No.
question for me?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously we're at 100 episodes. Honored to be your guest on the 100th episode. No doubt the honor. The
Thank
timing
you.
worked out great. So that is that's a lot of conversations with leaders. I feel like I have to ask, you've been 100 into this. How has hosting this podcast, changed the way you look at leadership,
Yeah,
overall?
one word, transformation. I know I just used it a second ago, right? But it has transformed me with the perspective that I'm getting every time, right? Yes, when I ask the question, what does kind leader mean to you? I'm going to get different answers. Like, for example, today, three things. That is memorable, right? Other people are saying the same similar things, but in their own way, right? And all that culminates into we have so many great and amazing people out there, right? And this is the purpose of having this podcast out there, because with everything that's going on with AI and in the world and all that stuff, I want to show and prove that there's amazing leaders out there that are doing the right things, are invested in the right things, are raising our, I say, vibration in a way that, the more energy and great positive energy we're bringing to the table, the higher we're going to rise, right? And that is what has made me feel very transformative because I'm learning so much. Every conversation that I have is teaching me something new, something that I didn't really think about, right? And I have the questions laid out, the topics, but it really is just a conversation that we're having with friends, right? A great question. Hopefully that answers. Sorry, I lost your voice there. Oh, yes, definitely going to be making it to 200, if not more. Right?
There you go.
I love doing this, and it's not just about the conversations and the people, but it's also the impact that, because you never know, Mike, who's going to hear one word, one sentence, or something that just triggers, right? The way we're wired, we're different, like that. It's going to help in its impact. So the more we do this, the better. So I definitely appreciate the question, and appreciate the friendship and the conversation, of course.
Yeah, great stuff.
All right, let's start heading down here. Ready? I have some rapid fire questions for you.
All right.
The first lesson you learned at Accenture that you still use today.
The first lesson I learned, probably that leaders do not like to expense trips or luncheons. So, hey, do that. Step up, figure out how you can, help your leaders with small tasks here. So it's a minor one, but I think one that just goes. There's all sorts of ways you can support.
Absolutely. One thing that's true about leadership and national security work that nobody outside this world understands.
It really is how different you have to view your job when mission is the front focus on this, and what you have to prioritize around safety and impact and other elements that are always true, but can have severe, consequences in there. And I think it informs how you live.
Beautiful. If a 25-year-old version of you walked into the office tomorrow asking for career advice, what's the one thing you'd say?
Stay the path, be open, and find great leaders, more than one to follow and stick with, and you'll be successful.
Awesome. Awesome. One closing question for you here. So, Mike, somewhere out there, I'm hoping leaders listening, right, who's been at their company for a while, maybe quietly, maybe without recognition, that they might be wondering if the staying is the right call. What do you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I think, it's good you're thinking about it. Take a look around you as well. Assess that culture that you're in. Understand other leaders and the paths they've taken, which I guarantee you are not all the same, and they've gone down all sorts of different roads. And then, understand that you can carve a path wherever you go for this as well. And that, you have a lot more ability and capacity than you probably think you do within this. So trust yourself.
Beautiful. Well said there, Mike. So, Mike, thank you very much for joining us. One thing that I want to kind of just express the conversation. I love your three things that you mentioned. Right, create the environment that's safe. Right, be consistent and be kind to yourself. Right, those are three great things that I personally strive to do, and it sounds like you do as well. And being in an organization for that long, I don't, I see it as a great opportunity. We don't see that as much now, right?
Very
And
true.
and maybe things are changing. Maybe my hope as a business owner, as a growing a business, that I want people to stay long because we want to create that environment where they're safe, where they can thrive, that they can grow, and there's so many things that need to happen, right? But we have to be intentional as leaders. We have to make sure that we're creating those safe environments. We're making the connection, we're making them feel heard, seen, and valued at the end of the day. Because we don't have any of that, we really don't have business. We just have, something that we're just cracking the whip to hopefully that everything sticks together and doesn't fall apart, right? And I really admire you, Mike, for not only how long you've been at Accenture, but also you as a person, right? The messaging and the way you've answered a lot of this question. I really respect you and really appreciate you making the time to kind of join us today. Awesome. Awesome. So, Mike, where can people find you if they want to connect? Is it LinkedIn or any other places?
Yeah, hit me on LinkedIn, email as well with us. I'm happy to share that for folks who want to connect out there. Also, I've tried to limit my social media stuff
I
in
know.
general, just, to keep myself sane around this. I'm all for my kids, but, those are the best ways. Or come find me, in person too. I'm sure you can track me down here in Maryland.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you very much again. And to our audience, thank you for being part of this journey with me. I know it's 100th episode. It's been quite the journey for 2.5 years. Thank
Boy.
you for, to continue to listen. And, there's going to be, like Mike said, there's going to be 100 plus more, right, for the years to come. So with that, I'll leave you with be kind, bring value, rise together. Have an amazing day.